Channel 250. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on the respective app store on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. This app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire and Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also on all smart TVs 2016 forward. So welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. You know, every now and then you get to spend time with beautiful people who are your friends. And this beautiful woman, Veenu Keller, who is not only the parent and child whisperer, but also an amazing practitioner in behavioral sciences. Her background is so profound, but I will say it this way. For the better part of 3 decades, she has really helped support, build, and nurture families so that they can actually come together and have a higher level of communication, a better lifestyle, and more so a fulfilling and just enriched life. So thank you, Veenu, for joining us. It's always beautiful to see you, my friend, and I appreciate you being here tonight.
Chuck, when you asked me to come and talk about the topic we're going to be speaking of, I was so excited. I was like, your best life. What a better way to live your life and the best you when you're a parent is understanding the do's and don'ts that I get to see as a mom and as a professional. So I was so excited to come and share this space with you. So thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. I know when we were talking about topics and kicking some things around, something came to mind, and that was kind of modern day parenting. What does that even look like now? You know, post COVID, it's like with metaverse and in the past, past 20 years, it was like video games and how do you cope with video games? And now it's like, how do you cope with virtual reality and AI? And then on top of it, we're going to throw in a compounding question that we're going to go deeper into because there's a whole nother layer to this, which is kind of the unspoken world of co-parenting. And that's often gets set aside because people are just so worried about being a parent. It's like, oh, well, yes, we're together now, but we're having issues. And so what does that look like moving forward? So I would ask you, Veenu, I mean, you work with so many different high level clients and from all walks of life. What are some of the things about modern day parenting that are glaring to you? Like you just go instantaneously, I see this happening and it's common, irrespective of money, status, or I'll just say lifestyle?
Well, it's such a great question because there's almost like 2 components to this. Pre-COVID, what we looked at as modern day parents was, our kids getting out of the house on time for school, that they're not missing the bus. So we don't have to be late for our jobs or our work, taking them to school, making sure that they're prepared for the day, setting them up to win, and then making sure that they're home, any extra activities that were there to support them and getting them to soccer, tutoring, whatever. And then making sure that there's dinner on the table and then wash, repeat. Right. I mean, that's really what it was. Right. And then all of a sudden we got hit by COVID. And I remember that opportunity. We were actually at my mom's in Idaho because my children go to a year-round school and they get 3 to 4 week breaks in between the school year. So we always try to make March the time to go visit my mom who's in Idaho. Nice. And all this stuff was happening with the talk of COVID. And I remember my mom saying, the world's not going to shut down. Like there's no way, and, she's a Fox watcher, not a CNN. But when you looked at both channels, there was a lot of scarcity talk going on. Oh. And so my mom's just said, and my dad, who are very high political people, like always into like, who's right, who's wrong. They're like, there's just no way. Like, there's no way the economy would shut down. And I'm like, forget the economy. What's going to happen with my kids?
Right.
Right. Like, I mean, if the economy shuts down, are we really going to be stuck in our houses? That means that I have to homeschool. That means that I don't get to send my kids to a higher education, that they get my education, which I don't really remember the whole sentence structure. And that means that I have to spend more time YouTubing to reteach myself at that time, 2nd grade math and 2nd grade reading and 2nd grade English, because it definitely was not taught that way when I was in 2nd grade in the 70s and 80s, right? So all my modern day parenting all of a sudden switched. It was no longer wondering where are they going to go, how are they going to get there, what about curricular activities because everything shut down. And
Right.
all of a sudden we found ourselves stuck. We weren't just stuck in our homes. My family, we were stuck in Idaho. Like we couldn't get back to North Carolina. And then all of a sudden it was, how are we going to get toilet paper? That was like the big topic, right? It's all over the news channels. How are we going to get toilet paper? And I said, for real, Mom? For real? We're worried about toilet paper? And we go to Costco and there's no toilet paper. And I'm like, this is for real. Like maybe this is just happening in Idaho though. Let me see what's going on where I live in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And sure enough, people are posting there's no toilet paper. That's when everything changed. That's
Yep.
when the stuff we started to take for granted, we no longer could.
You know what? That is such a huge distinction, because when all of your optics are normal, like all things are green light and go, there's a sense of confidence that comes with being able to provide leadership, mentorship, and some measure of, I'll say, reference, right? But when the kids are asking, hey, I got to go potty, you're like, okay, limit the sheets that you're like, whoa, wait, time out, Mom. It's like, are we hurting that bad? You know, what happened?
Do you really need to go right now? Could you hold it for a little bit longer?
You know, it's like, hey, they're charging $5 at the McDonald's, you know, to let you
Right?
in. It's like that you can't even get into because you can only go through the drive-through.
Right.
Please, my kid just has to use the restroom. No, do you have a mask? No, do you have a full body PPE? You know, or full body protection. You brought up a point though, which was very interesting, and that is when we start to look the metrics of what does it mean to even have that reference point of scarcity, because moving little things like having your electricity go out, or can you even have someone come and fix your Wi-Fi or fiber optic, and you're working from home now because you're sequestered to home. Most people aren't going into the office. And it's like all these different metrics that start to change. More so for the children though, socialization, playtime. And then you brought up when you said math, and I was like, oh, I remember the term new math. And I'm like, what happened to the old math? I was pretty good at the old math. This new math, I'm like, okay, this is different. And so to your point, no, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say just to that, I will say that's my husband and I, we had such a challenge parenting because I still had clients to see. And what's great for me is that this is my office. Like what COVID did not hurt me because this is what I do, right? I sit in front of a computer and I Zoom with my clients. So my life still had to continue, but now we had a new challenge, parenting, and parenting through being the teacher now. And a few things shifted. Number one, we had a heck of a lot more respect for our teachers. Oh. Like, holy smokes. Yeah. You know, I've always respected teachers.
Yes.
I had a whole new respect for them. The second thing that changed was screen time. So let me just back up a little bit, because before COVID, it was how many hours on screen should we have? Is that okay? You know, what's going to do to the brain? What about blue lights? Like I got my blue light glasses, like everything started to shift when COVID hit, because now that's all our kids had was screen time, not just for learning, but socialization.
Yes.
Now let's move into the era where we're coming out of COVID. Now we're starting to go to school. We're still masked up. So kids, it's like a metaphor, taking their voice away.
Yes.
And, and this might be controversial. And let me just share with the audience that's hearing us. I am not a scientific person to tell you what science says and what's or not. I'm going to talk through experience. That the masks, people still got COVID. Without the masks, people still got COVID. Like it was just, COVID was here to stay. And we knew that. We were going to, instead of us waiting for COVID to adapt to us, we had to learn how to adapt to COVID. But the kids still felt silence. Like it's hard to talk through a mask, then you're spitting and then your mask is wet. Like I remember my son coming home and his whole mask was just wet. And I'm like, were you chewing it? I mean, he's like, well, no. And they didn't even know their mask was wet, because when they're breathing, the moisture of their breath, when they're speaking, the little spit droplets that come out, right? And they got so used to it, their face started breaking out. And yet, nothing we can do. So now you put like ointment or stuff, now that's on the mask. And now we don't want them eating it. So there became a dilemma with that. And then kids are like, but I want to get on and play Roblox. I mean, why can't I? You let me 2 weeks ago. And I would explain, like, sweetheart, but 2 weeks ago, you didn't have friends that you could actually communicate with and play with.
Right.
And they didn't get it because they still were not communicating and playing anymore.
Right.
I was watching, like literally watching, and I was getting this info from my clients too, is that friends would come over when we were finally allowed to have kids in the house again, and they would sit next to each other on their phones or on their tablets.
Yes.
And I didn't realize this until this happened. And I walked in my son's room and I'm like, why are you guys not outside playing? They're like, no, we are. And I'm like, I mean, how are you communicating? Oh, Mom, we're playing Roblox. Well, don't you, I mean, you guys spent like a year here. Like, don't you want to get out and feel the fresh air? And they're like, no, we're good. Everything changed.
Everything changed. And it's kind of a precursor to like Ready Player One or the metaverse. The gamification of life is starting to become an epidemic level where instead of being in life and engaging in life physically, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, they are finding proxies, avatars, and different ways to identify as to who their identity is and who they are, to the point of even gentrification right now and identity crisis and people wanting to identify as we and they and them and not judging it. There's no judgment at all. It's just an identification. It's like, wow, it's a different way of it is. And it's a different way of referencing, right? And so modern day has a much more vast variety than when I was a child. It was so, I mean, it was the Leave It to Beaver, Gilligan Island era, the Brady Bunch, that was as diverse, a blended family. Okay.
Different strokes, right? Like different strokes when you had Mr. Drummond that adopted 2 boys that were black.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
we were like, what?
Exactly. What you talking about, Willis?
Right?
And it's like going, and so that was the level of diversity. And now it almost seems like we're into this microcosm of communication. And that's really what we're talking about. The gamification, the games, the interfaces, it's all communication styles and skills.
Right.
And the schools, when they went digital. Now, I remember when the schools went digital, and part of the platform, you were still going to school, but they didn't have books anymore. It was all digitized. It's on a laptop, a tablet, a computer. I'm like going, okay, great, we'll get you a better computer. Oh, no, Dad, you can't. Wait, you got to use this crappy Chromebook that hardly works and is clunky and cracks, breaks down all the time. And they're like, well, that's the one the school issued and it has all of its safety features. So that's the only thing you can use. And it's like going, wow. So resourcefulness starts to be curtailed based on scarcity of viruses, programs, what people are watching and viewing. And I'm like going, interesting. How do we start to change this in the modern world where now we're giving responsibility? We're setting standards, not necessarily just rules, because rules are made to be broken. Standards are made to be elevated and lived up to. Absolutely. And so there is power in languaging, but part of it's perception too, as to what we give our children. And I know you're such a great mom and parent. You have 2 older boys and you have, 2 younger children, and then you have grandkids as well. It's like Veenu's busy. Veenu and Brian are busy. And I love it though, because you get to see the variety of life.
I do.
And all the different levels. Because having young men, I look at them going, damn, these guys have more facial hair than I do. And they're great looking guys, by the way. And I knew Connor when he was young, it was like going, hello.
Adult now.
oh yeah. Hello. What is interesting to watch now is I'm starting to see that in some instances, the children actually even have more insight in communication than some of the parents do.
Well, so here's this. They have more insight in technology communication than the parents do.
Thank you. Correct.
Because the communication of having the pitch and catch conversation, yes, knowing how to make friends, that is the true epidemic that has happened. So going back to like COVID and coming forward, right?
Mhm.
To answer your question about modern day parenting is, so COVID helped those that had that social anxiety, that felt that they were not like other people. They were very uncommon, you know, in their class. And they were so excited because they were introverts and hermits. So excited COVID happened. Like it was the best thing. Like they won the lottery.
Yep.
However, even with kids like that, they need socialization. Like they need it. And
100%.
socialization for what we knew had stopped. We had to become resourceful, as you said before. How
Yes.
do we find the resources to keep the communication? So it became more texting. It became, you know, more Zooming. Like I remember when we had Skype and then Zoom came on, all of a sudden, like my mom's like, so, because my mom's a lawyer, right? So she had a court appearance and she goes, so Veenu, this Zoom thing, how do I do it? And I'm like, Mom, you just go to Zoom and you log on. And she goes, what do you mean log on? Like I mean, now we're
Yeah.
talking to a generation beyond me that's so confused and now they got to get on.
Yep.
And my son says, oh, Nani, don't worry. I'll show you how to do it. Like boom, boom, boom. He knew.
Yep.
And Zoom was so new to me. And I thought Zoom was new to him. Well, guess what? It wasn't so new to them. And
Nope.
he was in second grade. So
Mhm.
again, technology became the leading language. And I'll tell you, I don't know how you were raised, but when I was raised, it was I'm the parent, you're the child. I know you don't. Now we can't say that.
No.
Our kids are smarter than us in the technology world because they were born in it. So they grew up in it versus not being in it, right? And learning, we had to learn. Like I was so excited to get a new iPhone, and yet I was so scared to get a new iPhone because I'm like, now I have to relearn it. Oh my gosh. You know what? It's not even worth it. I'll keep my old one with the cracked screen and everything else because it's just going to take me too much brain power to learn this new phone because they just keep adding. And the kid's like, no, Mom, come on, let me see. Well, you don't even have a phone. What do you mean? No, Mom, let me show you. You just swipe up, you turn this, because they were smarter in the
Yep.
technology world than we were. So what happened? Kids, the biggest issue that I have seen with my clients was depression and anxiety
Yes.
and suicidal tendencies because now they're in a world they don't know how to communicate in. They don't know how to make a friend. I asked a client last night, he was in Australia, and I said, you know, so if I was a person in your class and I'm in grade 4 with you, how would you become my friend? And he's like, I don't know. I said, so what do you think friends have in common? I don't know.
Mm.
What questions could you ask me to just find out about me? How old you are? That is a great question. How old am I? And I had to literally role play with him so
Yes.
he could learn how to pitch and catch the conversation that once I said how old I am, what would be the next thing? And he froze. And I said, well, the next thing would be for me to say, oh, I'm this age. How old are you? Like to
Mhm.
throw it back. I said, let's pretend we have a ball. So, Chuck, you know, we were born in the Gen X generation, right?
Yep.
And it came now, no one taught us how to be friends. It just was, you go outside, do not come back in until the sun's going down.
Yep.
Good luck. And
That
all of a sudden, we had all these friends. We had so many friends.
there was a measure of experience that came from being engaged. And so because life was simple, we rode our bikes, our skateboards, you know, our roller skates everywhere, or we jogged or ran or played in the park. You played over the line, tag, played on swing sets and jungle gyms. You engaged. We were body surfing, running on the beach, playing frisbee, volleyball, tag, whatever the case might be. Everything centered around socialization time. And then there were sports. And the one thing that we're seeing now is that with uh, phys ed kind of being phased out in some environments, and it's kind of like an alternative thing. Well, if Johnny doesn't want to play, Johnny doesn't have to play. And it's like, wow, the lack of socialization. But I'm going to even take it more rudimentary. I remember going to the library and I remember going to study. And in order to find data, Veenu, I had to go to this thing called a card index, the freaking Dewey Decimal System. There was I mean, it was like, okay, people, there's more
Microfiche.
freaking
Microfiche.
oh, moving to the side, photographing stuff. Oh, and then having to take pictures, and it's like, I didn't have a phone. Got to go take the book over, have to photocopy it, have to. So, in the pursuit of knowledge, we became resourceful in finding things. There weren't computer programs. You go, how to play pickleball. What are the rules? No, you had to freaking go to the Dewey Decimal System and find a book on it and find out how Arthur Ashe started playing tennis. You know, the precursor to Serena Williams and Billie Jean King and all. And it's like, okay, this is crazy. But you learn by watching other people. You learn by playing people who are better than you. Now, fast forward to now. You want information? Google it.
YouTube.
Wikipedia. Wicca ask, you know, it's like Wicca, you get whatever the freak you want. And the challenge with it is that it's like this gamification. Here's the other challenge though. Back in the day, you read a textbook, there was an editor that went through it. There was a fact finder. There was someone that did fact checks to make sure that this was not conjecture or baloney, that this was real data. Now anyone can self-publish anything. Anything. And it's out there. And it's like, boy, it's in black and white, so it must be real. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. It's a lot of great opinions.
Yeah.
Certain things I'm in alignment with, other things, not so much.
Right. You know, and so when we look at all of this, here's something that has not changed. The do's and the don'ts.
Thank you.
Okay. Because when we look at what are the do's of parenting, it comes down to what is it that our kids need? Yes. You know, I have, you know, my TV show called Redefine Parenting on Tuesdays. And, you know, I always say on my program, be curious, not critical. The do is to be curious.
Yes.
The don't is critical. If we can create an open, safe, and trusting space for our children, those are all the do's, right?
Absolutely.
Help your child to hear them by not being judgmental. Help your child to come to you because you're curious and not critical. Critical brings blame and shame.
Yes.
When a child feels blame and shame, why would they come to you? Now all of a sudden kids are lying. We're like, why is Johnny lying? Well, how comfortable does Johnny feel coming to you? How comfortable does Johnny feel that he can talk to you about a breakup? Because you're going to say, well, I told you not to say that. I told you not to wear that. I told you, versus like, wow, honey. And how does that make you feel? And what can I do to support you? And where are you at right now? Forget what he did wrong.
Right.
That's not what Johnny wants to hear right now.
No.
Johnny wants to know that mom or dad are there to hear him. And it's one of the do's is listen to understand your child.
Yes.
Listen to hear the need of them. Because, you know, I was just talking to a young teenager today, and he has a lot of anger, And I said to him, tell me, what does anger mean to you? Like, where does anger come from for you? He's like, well, people just piss me off and things go wrong and I just get mad. And I said, wouldn't you know, that's my trigger too. People piss me off and things go wrong and I get mad too. I said, so is mad anger to you? And he's like, well, I get mad and then I become angry. I said, so you get mad and you do angry.
Right.
And he's like, yes. I said, I can appreciate that. Can I say what I think it is? And then you just tell me, does this mean yes to you? Or does this mean like, no, this does not resonate at all? Like, does it land on you? I said, here's my hunch. I said, I think that people who are very angry have a lot of hurt buried in them. And sometimes the hurt is not even knowledgeable and like they can't even remember where it came from, but
Right.
they just knew that it stung like a bee. And along the way, they learned that if I tell you I'm hurting or if I'm screaming for help through my behavior, you're still not getting it. So, what I need to do is if I get mad and then I do angry, like punching someone out, throwing a chair through a window, throwing a baseball bat through a bus, if I do that and you recognize I'm doing that, then I don't have to feel that hurt anymore because now I'm dealing with the consequences of angry. So it's a distraction.
Yes.
And I said, does any of that resonate with you? And he's like, yeah. And I said, so what are you hurting over? I mean, I'm not hurt. I'm not like, I don't feel any pain. And I said, so anger's a release.
Mm-hmm.
See, it takes more for a child to tell you he's hurting or she's hurting because then she has to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable to them feels like they're naked in front of a live audience.
Yes.
But being angry is a way of releasing that emotion, and you yell, they yell, and then you hug it out, and then life is good again. But all we've done is push down that hurt because what they're trying to do is people that are that angry are hurting other people because if they hurt you, they can't tell you they're hurting, but they want you to feel what they're feeling.
Yes.
So someone can recognize that. It is so like apparent to me what is going on because I work with a lot of kids with all these anger issues. And it
Sure.
dawned on me, they're not hating you, mom. They're
No.
angry because you're not seeing they're hurting. And so they want to hurt you, right? Hurt people. Because
Mm-hmm.
once you're hurt by them, they're like, she finally gets it. She's feeling what I'm feeling.
It's kind of the natural progression of how do babies express themselves.
Right?
They make noise because they don't have any other form of expression. But the truth of the matter is if only 7% of communication is spoken language, then it's energy, and it's that they want to get rid of this energy. They're looking for some form of exit strategy, and they're going, Mom and Dad, you're not hearing me. You know, you bring up a great point too, Veenu. And one of the things I would hallucinate around is that when someone hears that someone's disappointed in them, because what they're striving for is approval. They're striving for worthiness. They're striving for, I just don't want to be broken. And yet I get triggered or I get upset. And so I do anger because it's the only way I know to release. Otherwise, I'm going to explode. I'm really going to lose it. If you think this is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, just give me 5 minutes because Johnny's getting ready. Yeah, Johnny's getting ready to blow. And I love what you said. When we can shift from judgment to support and even offering a way to, for a standard, how to measure, where it's like, okay, so how are you feeling? That's a measurement. How we feel is a measurement. It's not a judgment. And it's like, oh.
And I just want to piggyback on that. The measurement for kids may not be just how do you feel, because that's a great question for us adults because we're able to communicate better.
Yes.
So, if you ask them, if 10 is happy, tell me what happy looked like in your life. Tell me a moment where happy was, and they're like, oh, when I went to Universal Studios, I was on a roller coaster. I was like so happy because it was my favorite ride. Okay, I want you to hold that. Now tell me when the lowest point of your life was and where you just felt like, how am I going to live another day?
Yeah.
And these are teenagers I'm talking to.
Sure.
They said the day that my mom died.
And
I said, okay, so that's our measurement tool. So now what's going on with you at school with that one 5th grade teacher or 10th grade teacher or whatever, right?
Right.
Tell me on that scale of happiness and that sadness, where are you at really?
Right.
And because it gives them context to the emotion of what they're feeling. See, that's just it. Kids have a hard time expressing the true feeling of what's going on. And so it's easier when we help children of all ages to really identify what's the measurement tool so they can check in with themselves.
Right.
I use a scale all the time on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is blah, blah, blah. 1 is blah, blah, blah. Where are you? And then whatever number they are. I'm like, so if you're a 5, what would have to happen for you to get to a 6? And you know what most kids tell me? For me to stop disappointing my parents. Oh, right? Like it gets you.
Heavy. I mean,
absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I've worked with a lot of celebrities. I've worked with the person next door. And here's the illusion that a lot of people have. And I get it from some of my clients. And this is not speaking ill of them or judging them, but
no.
I say, can you give me a testimonial? You know what, Veenu? Because I'm in the public eye, I thank you for what you've done for our family. Like, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We would have paid you double, 20 times double for what you've done. Thank you. And we don't feel we can give you a testimonial because then people will know. I'm like, what will they know? They'll know like our problems, like we're not like what people think we are.
Right.
And I'm like, but because you have that spokesperson, because you are that celebrity, and people do look up and you have a million followers, wouldn't that be the story you want to give people? Is that even we go through our own problems because kids are entitled, another thing that we could talk about, right? We could have a whole nother discussion on entitled kids. And so now me coming in and supporting you to teach your children gratitude and giving and their worth back, not through
Yeah.
gifts, but through quality time and showing up for them and hearing them and learning how to create that open, safe, and trusting space for them. You don't want to tell the world that? Veenu, again, we are so grateful to you.
Yes.
And yeah, and I say, you know what? I get it. I get it. And hopefully one day we can, share this openly because the world needs to know that you're just like us and you go through this similar problems that we all do and that there is a way to change it and it to be sustainable.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. We had I had an engagement with a beautiful man today named Dr. Steve Young, and he talks about living your life by a laser. And that oftentimes people have this laser pointer and they are pointing to specific things, their public opinion about they and their family, how they look in front of PR and press, their relationship with their child, their relationship with their spouse, their relationship with their weight, their occupation, career, the latest role that they had or did not have. And he said, when you're willing to put the laser away and you're willing to just go ahead and shine a light, and what happens is that light actually ends up helping everyone. It has nothing to do with specificity. It has to do with the core and essence of who you are. It's one of the reasons why when I hear people talking about, and irrespective of whether or not people love them or hate them, but Prince William and Prince Harry talking about mental health and wellness and acuity and stress and the things that went on with Princess Diana and their family and their struggles with mental well-being. It's like, wow, that has such a profound influence on how we look at, to your point, are you willing to give an endorsement? Well, am I shining a light for everyone? Or am I being selective where some people are being left in the shadows because we don't want to be found out? And it's like, but isn't that your truth? Isn't that your legacy, that you get to be honest and integrous? And to that point, this even comes down to now in modern day parenting, where I find parents that are living in anonymity, like even on their social media networks, they don't use their real name. They'll use an avatar. They'll use an NFT insignia. They'll use, and I'm like going, whoa. If you're going to espouse all these things, why wouldn't you share you? I don't understand that. It's like, oh, you're omnipotent behind the scenes. So on a Zoom call where you can have your camera off, you can even deepen your voice. You can change things. You don't even have to be that person. You can have a voice filter. And it's like, whoa, okay. So now all of a sudden anonymity gives you the importance that you can go ahead and espouse different belief systems, because you brought up something which was standards, and I'm going to call them values. These values that we hold near and dear are really the family values. It's like honesty, integrity, happiness. Aren't these things that you should hold so close and revel in?
Right. And I mean, and I'll say this too, because our kids, you're a father, I'm a mother, and I mean, just for our listeners out there, I hold almost every title of mom. I'm a mom of adult kids. I'm a grandma. I'm a mom of twins. I've been a boy mom. I've been an at-home mom. I've been a working mom. I'm a stepmom. I'm a co-parenting mom with my ex-husband. Like, I mean, pretty much I've had every title of mom, right? So I get to step in the different roles. And one thing that doesn't change for me is it's not what I say to my kids, it's what they see me do.
Yes.
And so if I am not willing to share my journey and because you've been on my show, I speak very openly and very vulnerable about my own experience where I screw up and how I learn from my screw ups so I could teach other people. And if I'm willing to hide because I'm embarrassed of who I am, what is that showing my kids? That it's okay to put another mask on. And I'm going to tell you, you've known me for, going on 2 decades now. Um, and it's how many masks I wore and how hard I worked to take those masks off. I don't want to put any more on. I
No.
mean, it's funny because, I'm a speaker. I go on stage and they're like, oh, we need to put makeup on you because the lighting and whatnot. And I'm like, I don't even like it. I don't even like it.
Right.
And, as I'm getting older, my melasma is showing and stuff. And I'm like, but if I cover it up, then I'm covering who I am and what I'm going through. And it's like I'm putting on another mask. And I didn't want to do it anymore. Like I used to love wearing makeup. That's all I could wait to do. My mom's like, oh, when you get to high school, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in high school. I wear makeup now. And now I'm like, but I've spent so many years under a mask. Why do I want to cover it up anymore? Like, what is it that I want to cover up? And
Well,
that's what we're teaching our kids too. So if we want to really support our kids, it starts with us first. And it's so funny because I get to quote you today on your own show, but I've used this quote for the last month on my show and in my coaching. And one thing that you taught me a couple months ago is that you could have your best life, but that doesn't mean that you're being the best you. But when you are the best you create your best life. And I don't know if that's your exact quote, but it's something like that. That's what I share. And it really makes people think, yes, my life is really great. I'm living in abundance with love and money and experiences and adventure and connection and friendship. And sometimes I realize I'm not being the best me in that moment. Am I
yeah.
being calculating? Am I being vindictive because someone hurt me, so I need to hurt them, or you hurt my family, I need to hurt you? And I have to check myself
Yes.
because the sustainability of the best life I have was not created on the person that I'm being in that moment. It was created as the person I was being when I was the best me.
Yes.
And that's the value, right? That when you said standard to value, the value is, and I'm here to say to the listeners, you have to figure out what the best you looks like. I'm not here to tell you what that looks like. Chuck's not here to tell you what that looks like. You're the only one. Because again, like I say on my show, this is our boot camp with our kids from birth to 18. It's our boot camp. From
Yep.
birth to 5, we have the biggest ability to affect the brain growth and what these kids can expand and what they can learn and who they can be in those first 5 years. And the rest of it, their personality starts to develop by what they see, what they hear, and the actions they take or do not take. So you have to decide. You don't get to decide what your child's going to be as much as we want to. I'm going to tell you right now, if that's you, go ahead and change that because I tried that and didn't work. But I'll tell you what
Nope.
my kids are, though. They're happy. My
Yes.
boys are happy.
Yep.
And that's what I realized. That's really what I wanted. But what you can choose is who do you let walk out that door at the age 18 into the world? What
Absolutely.
difference is your child going to make because you chose to put values that are going to help them when they walk out that door? Because after this generation, we got another one coming up, and we're not going to parent that generation
Nope.
the way we parented this one or the last one or the last one. Because I'm a multi-generational mom right now, right? I got different generations, and I'm sort of coming to that, and I'm helping to understand that. And that's why I do what I do, to help these kids have a childhood they don't have to heal from. And it starts with us parenting. And I know we're running out of time, so I wanted to bring in that co-parenting element that we were talking about earlier. A lot of us were saying that, back in the day, co-parenting was between divorced parents. Like, we're divorced, so let's co-parent the best we can. But as you and I were saying, is that we co-parent every day in our life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you bring up such a great point. Let's keep in mind that these values that are instilled, they actually nurture the heart. They actually nurture the emotional center. There's been studies done now on heart mapping, and I love this. In the 1970s, they actually found out something very interesting, Veenu, and that was in your heart, you have a neural net. And this neural net is actually made up of about 40,000 molecules that are called sensory neurites. Well, here's what's cool. They have the same computing capability that the molecules in your brain have. And so what they started noticing is exactly what you were talking about. When these children are young, what's happening is that these values, these experiences, these emotions that are being partaken of and experienced are imprinting biochemical signatures and sensory optics within every molecule of their body. But that heart space, this is where now you can start to find so much intelligence quotient, and it's coming from the heart. Mm-hmm. It's coming. That's that insane level, and it's like, ooh, that kid has a great heart. You go, don't know where they got it from. Yes, you do. From 0 to 5, it's like, okay, this is awesome. You brought up such a great point about the do's and the don'ts, and in co-parenting, there seems to be this differentiation right now that's going on. And it's not in all relationships, but there seems to be this systemic one upmanship or one downmanship that I'm seeing amongst the parents. And the kids are the ones that are watching this tennis match and trying to figure out who's winning. And I go, well, if you believe in what Simon Sinek says, and it's an infinite mindset, no one's winning.
Right.
There is no winning. There's only staying in the game as long as you can.
Right.
So you're not just a parent till they're 18. You're not a co-parent till they're 18. You're a co-parent for life. Then you may be a grand co-parent. And, and it could be a great grand co-parenting opportunity down the road. Who knows? But we get to decide that the do's and the don'ts don't have to be absolutes, that they can actually be standards that we keep. We rise to standards. We live to meet standards. We don't judge standards. We just cultivate them. Rules, we know rules. What's the saying? Rules are made to be broken. And people will try to press the rules and push the rules and bend the rules. But I see very few times where people try to break the standard. They always try to lift the standard because the motive and intention behind that standard is pure. And it comes from exactly what you talk about, which is the core values and beliefs that we share as parents and as friends and as adults and also as children.
Right. And it's looking at the foundation, when, like, what does co mean? Co means together, together parenting.
Yes.
And together parenting doesn't mean that you need to live together. And together parenting doesn't mean that you have to be separated, because it really came into, like, how do we co-parent now that we're divorced or splitting up or whatever, And I think the hardest part of co-parenting is when two people raised by two different families, or, for like me and my husband, we're raised in two different cultures. I'm Indian, my husband is not. And he was raised by his family that are, white race and whatever. I was raised by a very Indian family in America. Yep. Like, that's a challenge in itself, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I know
Asian family in America. Yeah, you got that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, so now you were raised Asian family, so you already know we had a lot of rules.
Oh.
And even though rules were meant to be broken, right? And even though rules were meant to be broken, not in my house, they were not. Because if I broke a rule, my butt got broken. Okay. So I already knew not to break rules in my house. And so I came to the marriage with a lot of rules. And my husband, God bless him, came with a lot of lackadaisy, as he calls free range parenting. And I said, you should coin that, because that's exactly what you do, free range parent, right? Compared to what? So if you think of that, it was like a beautiful word, because if you think of chickens, right? Because we think of free range chickens. If they're not free range, there are boundaries.
Yes.
There are boundaries, rules. So when you have free range parenting, as my beautiful husband says, it's take off the fences and let them be kids.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here going, you can't go out barefoot. Like, no. You're going to get dirt. You're going to track in the house. You can't take off your shoes, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And he's like, they need to be kids and they need to get dirty and they need to build their immune system and they need to get grounded by walking on the grass by them. Grass. You want them to walk in the grass barefoot, like literally, Chuck. And you know my husband, so I'm sure you can imagine the conversation that's going on when the kids were like 2.
Right.
And I'm like, let them play outside without shoes, and now I'm like, take off your shoes and go play in the rain, right? Because that's the beauty, how my husband and I learned how to co-parent. I had to learn how to let down the boundaries and accept that he has something to offer.
Yes.
And that my way wasn't the only way to parent our kids. And what he had to learn from me was that sometimes kids need these boundaries because they feel safe.
Yes.
And that is where we learned how to create this beautiful thing of co-parenting. And sometimes it's still a challenge. And then we have to laugh about it and be like, okay, so where's the compromise? And what's the outcome we want for the twins? That's really what it comes down to.
That's imperative. When you say that, it's interesting. What I started noticing is that in the journey of life, when we start to look at direction, no one judges direction. We measure millimeter or a mile. And if progress equals happiness, what feeds progress is possibilities. When we make staunch rules, outcomes, goals, and they're not met, the human condition is that the brain judges and it's binary. So it says, hey, you could have gotten 99.99%. And as Asians, and I'm Irish and Japanese, so military dad, hello.
You got double rules.
Oh, it's it was crazy. And when the expectations were high. But what I realized growing up is that they just had really high standards. They weren't judging us. And in that space, it actually created a sense of well-being and an aspiration to improve on a consistent basis. So, a constant never-ending improvement. Although, if you broke the rules, there were consequences. So I would say I had a blended childhood of finite and infinite mindset. It's like, hey, some of the players, that's cool because you're growing, so you're going to meet new people, but there's rules. And if you break the rules, there's penalties. It's like, ruh-roh. Right. But I loved what my parents always raised us on, which was about the outcomes. There is no winning. You don't win at love. You don't win at life. You don't win at happiness. You get to partake and enjoy. So the outcome is to stay in the game as long as you can and enjoy it and thrive and feel compelled to be able to connect and enjoy one another. And I just wondered, like what you were saying with the co-parenting, what a beautiful thing it is when you appreciate the other person and their distinctions and their gifts and their values. And you're like, oh man, my kids are getting the experience from this.
Right.
Wow.
And you said something real quick, is that about the game of life. If you think about a board game and you won every single time, how much fun are you going to have playing that board game? None. Sometimes you got to lose because it's in the losing you learn. You learn a different strategy. You learn a different way to do it. And so sometimes it's not always looking at how do I win at the game of life. Sometimes it's looking at what's the next experience I can have in life.
Exactly. This is such a beautiful testament to the work that you do. It's about communication and engagement. And I'm so grateful to you. You're such a guiding force in my life, personally and professionally. And yes, we have known each other for the better part of 2 decades. And I am definitely a better man for it, my dear friend.
Me as well.
We get to. It's not a have to. We get to. And these types of conversations, my fervent hope, just like yours, is that we get to share some information with folks that helps them get some distinctions and ask better questions.
Absolutely. And just remember to be curious, not critical.
If I take away anything today, that's the main distinction. It's that we get to be inquisitive. We don't have to judge. And that's the most beautiful part. So just remember, y'all, this show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. please check out for all news and programming, Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, live it. Veenu, thank you. Appreciate you so much.